Riots continue to rage across the country, and a deep state swamp creature gets what was coming to it. Hello, I'm Mike Huckabee with The Breakdown. In an extraordinary moment following his speech Monday night, President Trump, accompanied by his daughter Ivanka and several top officials, left the White House and walked across Lafayette Square to historic St. John's Church. The church had been damaged by rioters, and the president held up a Bible. He was assailed from all sides by media people claiming he was blaspheming. I got a feeling many of them were fine with that concept until just that very moment, if they even knew what blasphemy meant. And by Pelosi, Schumer, Biden, Hillary, and the usual gang claiming that peaceful protesters had been driven from the park so that he could do a photo op. Well, a couple of important points to make. His photo op took place long past the 7 p.m. curfew, so the protesters would have been removed from the park anyway. But also, park police sources told WTOP, a radio station in the D.C. area, that the action taken against protesters during the president's Rose Garden speech 20 minutes before curfew was initiated by those so-called protesters throwing water bottles, presumably full ones, at the park police. And according to the source, they didn't use tear gas, contrary to mainstream media reports. They used smoke canisters, which don't have irritants. Also, park police wasn't aware of Trump's imminent trip across the square, meaning the early clearing of protesters had nothing to do with him. So when a story went around that he was locked down in the White House by the Secret Service when the rioters got too close, his critics said he was a coward who wouldn't come out of the White House. But when he walked right out of the park and went over to the church, he was accused of being confrontational and escalating the violence. It's nice to see that despite all the turmoil and upheaval, one thing never changes. To these people, no matter what Trump does, it's always wrong. Like when he ordered riot teams from the Federal Bureau of Prisons to Washington, D.C. and Miami. Having given the leaders of blue states and cities ample time to stop the rioting, arson, and looting that's being ginned up to exploit and dishonor the death of George Floyd, President Trump rightly decided it was time for the federal government to step in those locations, and more could be forthcoming if the local governors didn't take action. That could include mobilizing thousands of soldiers, which the president does have the power to do under the Insurrection Act, dating all the way back to 1807. Now, the Insurrection Act has been invoked over a dozen times, most recently in 1992 by President George H.W. Bush to stop the Rodney King riots in Los Angeles. Sadly, it may be necessary to utilize again because so many Democratic officials are refusing to do their number one job of protecting public safety. Oregon Governor Kate Brown is so addlepated with Trump derangement syndrome that she actually admitted she refuses to do what's necessary because of Trump. She said at the news conference, and I quote, "Having soldiers on the streets across America is exactly what President Trump wants. Trump wants governors to deploy the National Guard as a show of force to intimidate the public." End quote. However, within a few hours, she had this to say.
Last night, rather than putting soldiers on the streets of Portland, I directed the Oregon State Police to deploy additional officers to support Portland Police and the Sheriff's Department. We also had 50 National Guard members on standby nearby and ready to deploy within minutes in the event local law enforcement found themselves overwhelmed.
Just another kooky far-left governor realizing, without realizing, Trump was right. During his Monday night address at the Rose Garden, Trump said, "I swore an oath to uphold the laws of our nation, and that's exactly what I'll do. I am your president of law and order and an ally of all peaceful protesters." He said we cannot allow their righteous cries to be drowned out by an angry mob. And he went on to excoriate the inaction of several governors in the face of violent protest. Here's President Trump.
A number of state and local governments have failed to take necessary action to safeguard their residents. Innocent people have been savagely beaten, like the young man in Dallas, Texas, who was left dying on the street, or the woman in upstate New York viciously attacked by dangerous thugs. Small business owners have seen their dreams utterly destroyed. A federal officer in California, an African-American enforcement hero, was shot and killed. The destruction of innocent life and the spilling of innocent blood is an offense to humanity and a crime against God. That is why I am taking immediate presidential action to stop the violence and restore security and safety in America. I am mobilizing all available federal resources, civilian and military, to stop the rioting and looting, to end the destruction and arson, and to protect the rights of law-abiding Americans, including your Second Amendment rights.
Well, speaking of Second Amendment rights, a lot of people, especially in blue states, are waking up to the scary reality that their leaders are going to do very little to protect them. So they better be prepared to protect themselves. But before I get to that, if you're enjoying this video so far and you'd like more of our content, please consider subscribing to the channel below and clicking the notification bell next to it. Well, like I was saying, because blue states won't protect their law-abiding citizens, gun sales are exploding, and the price of gun stocks is booming. Former CIA officer Brian Dean Wright tweeted that he talked to a major progressive Democrat fundraiser in Colorado who got spooked by rioters getting pretty close to his house. And nobody he knew owned a gun, so he was going to buy one today. I just hope there's not a 10-day waiting period. Wright said, "The left is losing their base, folks. People prefer order over anarchy." I imagine that's right. Many years ago, when the KKK was terrorizing blacks in the South by burning down their neighborhoods, it was the NRA who was the only constitutional rights organization that defended their right to buy guns to protect themselves. History is merely repeating itself. Meanwhile, word on social media is that Antifa, having helped torch blue cities, now thinks they're going to move into the suburbs and terrorize people there. Well, that'd be about the dumbest idea they've come up with yet, and that covers a lot of territory. Many people live in the suburbs after fleeing the big cities because they were sick of depending on noodle-spined leftist mayors who order the police to stand down and who sympathize with criminals over victims. So since they can't depend on their government for protection, they have guns. Polk County, Florida Sheriff Grady Judd put it succinctly when he warned, "The people in Polk County like guns, they have guns, I encourage them to own guns. And if you try to break into their homes to steal, set fires, I'm highly recommending they blow you back out of the house with their guns." Wow. Well, in the midst of all of this chaos and seemingly drowned out by the rest of the mainstream media's dishonest reporting, George Floyd's own family, along with a multitude of black business owners whose livelihoods have been destroyed, are calling for the violence to stop. Recently, Floyd's brother traveled from Brooklyn to the spot where his brother died, and he had some powerful words.
If I'm not over here messing up my community, come on. Then what are y'all doing? What are y'all doing? Y'all doing nothing. Because that's not going to bring my brother back at all.
As of Monday night, at least 11 people had died during these violent riots, and there's no justification for doing wrong. There may be reasons, but that doesn't make it justified. Many people, in order to justify their depravity, have been sharing a quote from one of Martin Luther King Jr.'s powerful speeches, Other America. In that speech, he said, "In the final analysis, a riot is the language of the unheard," end quote. Now, you might hear that and think that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was justifying riots and violent protest or even condoning them. You'd be as wrong as a leftist. As is often the case, more context offers a different story.
So I will continue to condemn riots and continue to say to my brothers and sisters that this is not the way. Continue to affirm that there is another way. But at the same time, it is as necessary for me to be as vigorous in condemning the conditions which cause persons to feel that they must engage in riotous activities as it is for me to condemn riots. I think America must see that riots do not develop out of thin air. Certain conditions continue to exist in our society, which must be condemned as vigorously as we condemn riots. But in the final analysis, a riot is the language of the unheard.
Did you catch that? It's necessary for me to be as vigorous in condemning the conditions which cause persons to feel that they must engage in riotous activities as it is for me to condemn riots. He was condemning riots as strongly as he was condemning racism and indifference. By saying riots are the language of the unheard, he's not justifying them like so many are justifying and downplaying the violent riots of the past few days. He's pointing out there's a reason for them. And if there's a reason, there's a solution. He urged his community that there was another way to effect change, and he was right. Now, I think we're all in need of some good news, so I'm going to leave you with some. There's a developing story that could have major implications, and if you keep up with my newsletter on MikeHuckabee.com, I'll have more there for you as the events progress. On Friday, FBI General Counsel Dana Boente, a career FBI and Department of Justice official who as acting Deputy Attorney General signed at least one of the FISA warrant renewals on former Trump campaign associate Carter Page, turned in his resignation letter to FBI Director Christopher Wray. This occurs just as Lindsey Graham is getting ready to start Senate Judiciary Committee hearings on the Trump-Russia investigation. And in May, FBI Director Christopher Wray announced that there would be an internal after-action review of the FBI's handling of the Michael Flynn case to determine whether current FBI employees engaged in misconduct. Oh, I'm sure that'll be a very thorough review. Now, I've yet to wade through the whole thing, but according to this report, Boente was at the center of corrupt intent and malign activity toward the Trump administration. The piece offers several instances of Boente's questionable actions, including his coordination with Wray to block release of documents on the Flynn case. Well, that is until Attorney General Bill Barr intervened. This implies nothing but the worst about Wray as well. As infrequently as we've heard his name, Boente apparently and reportedly was the official to whom all the corrupt players on Robert Mueller's team reported. And according to the report, Boente's role as a manipulative fixer to protect the ongoing corrupt action of the Mueller probe was exactly why FBI Director Chris Wray hired him. What we learn here about Boente's apparent behind-the-scenes role as an embed covering for his colleagues might answer a lot of nagging questions, such as how certain anti-Trump people got their jobs in the first place. Well, thanks so much for watching. Please subscribe below, click the notification bell, and leave a like and a comment if you enjoyed the video. And if you want more of my news analysis and commentary, sign up for my free newsletter. It's delivered twice daily to your email inbox. All you got to do is go to MikeHuckabee.com and sign up. It's totally free. Also, be sure to tune in this Saturday for the next episode of Huckabee. That's it for this edition of Breakdown. I'm Mike Huckabee.